I spent over 20 years playing the sport of basketball. And I remember clearly in junior high and high school, coaches yelling to their players that were playing defense, particularly on me, saying to make her go to her left. And for those who may not be familiar with what that means, if you have a player who is right-handed, let's say they dribble with their right hand, shoot with their right hand, you want to force them to go to their less dominant hand. So for me growing up, coaches would always they would tell their players to just play regular defense on me. I would go right a couple of times, and then it was, well, make her go left. In other words, get in a defensive position that will force her to go to her less dominant side, which for me is my left. But what people discovered is that I was able to go both directions when I was playing basketball. And the fact of the matter is, I was actually more comfortable going to my left hand. A lot of the things that I did, aside from shoot, was with my left hand. Here's why, and I'm going to get to here's why that's important for us in our devotional. But what happened, I was a child and I fell in basketball practice and fractured 3 fingers on my right hand. So my whole entire right hand was taped up. I couldn't play, couldn't use it, anything. And the story has it is that I literally was walking around extremely sad, extremely frustrated, to the point of my father, who was also my coach, eventually allowed me to get on the court. But the thing was, I could never use my right hand. If I was going to be out there, I had to only use my left hand. So every day on the court, I would dribble with my left hand, shoot with my left hand, to the point where I would be able to use either or once I was able to finally play with my right hand. So as I got into junior high and high school, it didn't matter which way defensively you played me, because I could go right, I could go left, I could shoot with either or. Left hand to a certain extent, depending on how far away I am from the basket. But the point is, because one thing was taken away from me, it forced me to strengthen something that I didn't use a lot. Here's where I'm going with this. In the beginning of this pandemic, our traditional ways of worship, what we traditionally did on Sundays, was in a sense taken away from us, right? We couldn't go inside of the church building for corporate worship. But what we've had to do in this past year, and many people have said shift, many people have used the word pivot, but what we've had to do was figure out alternative ways to still achieve the same end result. We had to figure out alternative ways to still get to the point of worship. Even though our original lane of worship, even though our original and primary source of corporate worship was going inside of a building, we now had to get to the point where, okay, let's become accustomed doing something else. Let's open ourselves up to different possibilities. And can I tell you that it's been a blessing? It has truly been a blessing to see different church leaders expand themselves beyond their original 4 walls. And I'm going 2 places with this. In what we consider the Great Commission in Matthew chapter 28, it tells us that we are to go and make disciples across different areas, right? It wasn't just make disciples locally. We had to go into different areas. Wherever we were going, we were charged to make disciples. Here it is. This pandemic has forced us to really do Matthew 28. This pandemic has forced us to not just focus on our 4 walls, But as we're maneuvering, as we're going into different spaces, as we're in our homes, some of our homes have become our churches. We've had to maneuver, we've had to pivot, we've had to shift. And can I tell you now, the gospel is being spread across different nations. The gospel is now being spread across different languages. And so while we've had to shift, while yes, we've had to pivot, there has been a benefit. The church has continued to do the work of the church. The church has continued to do the work of the Lord. We've continued to push ministry forward. So yes, while our primary alternative, or while our primary source may have been temporarily closed down, there were other avenues. There were other ways for us to get the same result. Here's the second place I'm going with this. In your life, you have goals, you have dreams, you have visions, you have a plan in place. Many of us may have those plans in place, and maybe we've hit a stumbling block. Maybe our primary method to achieving that goal has been blocked. Well, now we got to pivot. Now we have to shift. Now we have to open ourselves up to other ways of meeting our goals. But here, we do not have to hit a stumbling block and just stay stuck. We don't have to reach a crossroads and stay at that crossroad. As we've seen the church pivot and maneuver in a pandemic, we in our own personal lives, those of us who have goals, we can also pivot. We can also restructure some things. We can also reorganize some things so that we can continue to meet our goals. Do not allow what has happened in this past year to keep you off track. Do not allow what has happened in this past year to get you so frustrated and upset because this one door was closed, but there's 20 more opening. Shift, pivot, open those other doors and see. You never know what God is doing. You will never know how God maybe he closed that door because there are so many other opportunities for you to be used in. Maybe there are so many different opportunities for you to take advantage of. Don't get stuck there. Hear me, please. Do not get stuck at the no. Do not get stuck at the closed doors. There is something else that is better. There is something else that will be more beneficial for you, from your family, for your community, for whatever it is. There is something better. There is an other. Yes, we have become so accustomed to doing things a certain way, but as we can see, that's not always going to be the case. Who would have ever thought that we would not have Easter in church last year? Who would have ever thought that we would not physically go inside of a building corporately to worship together? Who would have ever thought that? But it did. But guess what? God is still the same, and our worship with God is still the same. It may look different, but we're still worshiping the same God. We might not be inside of a church building. We might be in our homes. We might be in our cars. We might be on our jobs. We might be outside, but we're still worshiping the same God. So again, even though there's a roadblock in front of you, don't stop. Pray and ask God, okay, God, where do you want me to go? How do you want me to achieve this goal? How is it that you want me to pivot? And when he gives you that answer, be obedient and follow. I'm going to say that again. Once he gives you the way in which he wants you to pivot, be obedient and follow. Think about it. If the doors of the physical doors of the church closed and we did not pivot, you know how many churches physically, virtually will be closed? You know how many souls could potentially be lost because we did not pivot? So if the church could pivot universally, locally, whatever, if the church can endure that pivot, then we can do it on a smaller scale too. So again, please, ma'am, please, sir, just because you hit that roadblock does not mean that you get to stop. There's another way. There's another way. I need you to fight. Your family needs you to fight. Your community needs you to fight. So fight and endure until you get it done.